Hello and welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. Joining me today is Dr. Edith Shiro. She is a clinical psychologist and also the author of the most amazing book, The Unexpected Gift of Trauma, The Path to Posttraumatic Growth. Her book serves not only as a roadmap, but provides practical tools and takeaways to recover and thrive after trauma. It is truly a game changer for our industry and for our audience. And Dr. Shiro, thank you so much for joining me because this is a timely matter and what a perfect time for this book to come out.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I feel like this is part of a beautiful, amazing historical place. So I'm super excited, looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Oh, shucks, Dr. Shiro. Oh, what a beautiful name. Shiro as opposed to hero. It's beautiful. So talk to me about what inspired you to write this book. You have 25 years of clinical experience, then you have lifetime of experience in your own past. So let's talk about that geology.
Yeah. This is a question that I've been asked a lot lately, also because for me this is an everyday kind of work. But really looking back, I come from a history and a family of refugees and Holocaust survivors and persecution and really immigrants. And even growing up, I grew up in a community that was full of immigrants and refugees. And I always had this question of what's really going on here? How come people can go through such hardship, adversity, and do so well and thrive in life, and other people stay stuck and then have it very difficult? And I was a very curious girl. So this was always something that I wanted to see how the mind works, how people do, what's inside people's, mind, brain, what's their psychology. So of course I studied psychology, but this thought and this question of what makes a difference. How come some people do it one way and people do it another? What makes people do better and people do worse? What helps people do it in one way versus other people? And I kept looking into that. And really my line of research has always been that, almost like negotiating trauma in some form or another. What are the defense mechanisms, how people thrive? What are these factors that make a difference? And this is how it came out. I mean, I'm working also with patients for more than 25 years in my office, and not just with individuals, but families and communities. I've seen some of this transformation, and really I couldn't wait to share this with the world. And in 2019, I'm like, okay, I need to put this out there because I have it written. It's all there. I know what I'm saying. And so I'm saying, how am I going to sit down to write this book? Because I like doing things and going places. And, I'm always coming up with a new activity and a new project. And then 2020 happened.
So we have COVID shut down, quiet. This was your time to get quiet.
Yes. So I was already writing it, but when COVID happened, it really forced me to say, you have no excuse, just sit there and finish it.
What is trauma? Let's talk about what is trauma, because it's a buzzword, but what does it really mean? What happens emotionally? What happens physiologically? What is that? How is that created and show itself that you've seen in your practice?
So trauma really comes from even more, I would say 20, 30 years ago, it became more of a well-known word, mostly coming from the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis. But the way I'm talking about trauma today, trauma means wound, but the way I talk about it is very expanded, meaning trauma is a relational problem that we have. Trauma is when we break our belief system and we're shattered and we don't have coping mechanisms. We don't have a way to face that overwhelming experience. Trauma is when we started to have physical symptoms and we have emotional symptoms and psychological symptoms that we cannot deal with. And we develop trauma responses as a way of surviving the danger. And the danger can be from the outside and danger can be from the inside. It can be an emotion. And we start developing this fight, flight, freeze responses to, and some of the time and a lot of the time we stay stuck in those responses. And that's when we start developing this illnesses and psychological problems and, repetitive behavior, addictions, chronic anxiety, depression. I'm seeing a lot of that lately, a lot more than before.
Is it because of what's going on in the world? Is it because of October 7th? Is it because of the Holocaust? Is it because of what's going on in other countries as well, and the trauma that's going on within each of these countries? Is it going intergenerationally? We talk about the Holocaust, like what carries on from then to now, and like even in the war that's going on in Russia and Ukraine, what that trauma is going to look like from years from now if it's not dealt with now. I interviewed a young man in Israel who came in and he talked about his experience, and I said to him at the end, how are you taking care of yourself? Yeah. What's going on inside of you? And he said, I haven't had time yet to stop and think about that. And I might give him your number because it's, but truly, like, yes, what happens and how, if we don't process it now in generations, yes, how it's going to show.
And what you're talking about is super important. When you're touching on is intergenerational trauma. And I do want to stop and talk about that. But I want to make a distinction here because trauma has always existed in humanity, and problems and collective traumas and wars and difficulty and extreme situations have always happened in history. I want to tell you the one difference that I think is happening right now. Before, maybe back in the day when we were living in communities and we were living in our small little environments, we would know what was going on with our families, with our close friends, and maybe with some members of our community, because that's the reach that we had. And that created stress and anxiety, and it was difficult. And of course, all the inherited trauma that we got. These days, Farah, as you know, we are absolutely exposed to every corner of the world of what's going on. And we're constantly overstimulated and overly informed with every single corner of the planet, especially all the bad news, especially the constant bombardment of information through our social media and through our real technology. And I want to say that makes our nervous system be in constant alert mode.
Is that fight or flight mode?
Yes, because we're constantly receiving the stimulation that there's something wrong, that we are in danger. Even if it's happening in China, even if the war is happening in Ukraine, we're feeling it in Miami. So that's a huge difference. That before we were a little bit more protected in our misinformation, or in our lack of information of this globalization that is happening. Now we are aware and affected by everything that's happening, by the children that are dying, by the people that are starving, by the climate that is changing everywhere, right? So when are we taking the time to really lower our overstimulation and take care of our nervous system and say everything's okay, I'm safe?
How do you do that?
Right, this is the thing. So we're carrying so much that it's happening in the moment. It's in the present moment with ourselves, with our collective, and what we've had inherited from our ancestors, right? How do we do this? What has to happen for us not to, go crazy and say, okay, this is so overwhelming that I can't deal with this. And
but it's true. But it's true. Yes. It's taking that moment to
exactly
to breathe.
Right.
And what other opportunities are available?
Right. So one of the things that I always say is, take a pause and really create a pause in your life, in your day, and stop for a moment to look around and say, okay, what am I doing? Where am I responding from? Am I responding from a place of anger, from a place of trauma, from a place of fear? Or am I responding and making decisions from a place of confidence and, trust and connectedness? And that's why this level of consciousness is so important.
And that's a very hard thing to do, is to separate the brain from the heart or the body. It's a very
but it's not separating. Yeah, but it's the opposite. It's connecting them, not separating them.
Oh, that's good. That'll be $550. I'll write you a check at the end of this.
But because that's one of the things that keep people, when we are in trauma, we tend to separate, we tend to fragment, we tend to isolate, we tend to freeze, we dissociate inside ourselves, not only with each other, but inside ourselves. So what's the response to healing trauma is connecting again. That's exactly, you got it. You actually said the most important thing, which is not separating, but connecting. And it's connecting with ourselves, and it's connecting with the people around us. That is going to make a difference.
Absolutely. So talk about what influenced or why you wrote the book. What you got quiet 2020 and you said, okay, collectively I've got to put this together and make a roadmap for a community. How do you go about doing that?
One of the things that I kept seeing is that people in my field of psychology keeps focusing on the negative, on the symptoms, or what needs to be cured almost from a medical model. Mm-hmm. And one of my huge intentions with this book is to bring this hope that even if you have trauma, even if you have a challenging situation, that it's not a life sentence, that there is a way of transforming whatever is happening to you into almost like a trampoline, almost like a springboard into transformation, into transcendence, into making this an opportunity for growth. And I think that's really important to do and to say, because having that positive understanding, and I'm not saying that everything has to be positive. This is not toxic positivity at all, but it's saying, even though I'm in a very bad place right now, I'm holding a kernel of hope, or somebody else with me, either my therapist, my family, my friend, my community, is holding this light of hope that I know I can get there and I can grow from this and I can be transformed by this and not stay stuck in the sadness, in the brokenness, in the hopelessness. And that for me is super important.
And in your book, you say that trauma is a gift.
Yes.
That's an interesting paradigm.
Yes. And this is what I see every time that I work with my patients and I work with my communities.
What kind of patients do you have?
But this is what they say to me.
Yeah.
They say, Edith, I don't wish this on anybody. It doesn't matter if it's a loss of a loved one, an accident, a war, a divorce, an immigration situation, being bullied, a chronic, physical illness. They say to me, these are the words. It doesn't matter if it's 9/11, suicide collapse. This is horrible what happened to me. I don't wish this on anybody, but I would not change anything in my life, because this has made me who I am today. And every time I hear that, I am like so moved. Even like now, it makes me want to cry, and I'm so in awe to say, wow, people are so courageous, are so brave. They're so grateful for having gone through what they went through and still come out on the other side with this connection, with this appreciation for life. This is what post-traumatic growth is.
And that's what I wanted to hit on, because it seems like there's a lot of PTSD and you hear it. But what I found fascinating in the work is that this is a springboard to post-traumatic growth.
Right.
And something I didn't know until I heard you speak a couple of weeks ago.
That's why I write the book. Exactly.
I know. And it is available for purchase.
But this is exactly what happens. Everybody knows what PTSD is, and nobody knows what PTG is. And this is really my message to the world. There is such thing as growing from trauma. There's such thing as getting gift from trauma, having more appreciation for life, having more meaningful relationships, finding almost like your sense of purpose in life, understanding what your priorities are. A lot of people have developed more of a spiritual connection. These are all amazing gifts that we're getting from overcoming, from processing trauma that we might not have gotten otherwise. I'm not saying this is the only way to get them, but people that really do the process and really work through it get all these things.
And then you talk about, like, they start organizations, they start foundations and that, you said, is the growth. That is the post-traumatic growth, is propelling them forward to doing something of a positive nature.
That's part of it. I mean, a lot of the people that get into this place of growth, they say, well, not only that I'm healed and not only that I'm doing so well, but I want to share it back to the community. I want to be proactive. I want to be an active member of my community, and I want to give back. And usually these things happen. I wonder, maybe later I'll ask you how come you're doing the work that you're doing, because you are helping the community, you are doing the work that you're doing, and it comes probably from a very personal place.
I think it comes from, for me, it comes from maybe I've dealt with something. Maybe I can help another person, or I've known another person. Maybe I can be a conduit, be of service to another human being. I didn't grow up in a home that was very charity oriented. So maybe it's part of me giving back, doing some tzedakah or something good, being a force of good through having guests on my show and doing the other work that I do in a community. And I love people. I love people's stories. I love to hear. For me, it's a very intimate moment for us to be together. It's a half an hour of a relationship that I probably wouldn't have any other place.
True.
Than in this safe arena.
Right. And that's what I mean by gift, is that these kind of intimate connections that are more meaningful. It's like really appreciating those places that are more intentional, that are more conscious, that you're not living life in a more superficial way, going through it like in autopilot.
Yeah, like a robot, but feeling it and affecting change. And I think that's probably why you're doing your work too, is figuring out your own stuff as you go along, but also in the grand scheme of things, what's going on in a community, whether locally or globally.
Yes, I mean, patients think that I'm helping them, but they're helping me, really.
I've heard that so many times.
I'm the one learning from them. I'm the one growing with them. You know, I'm super grateful. I'm infinitely grateful for the work that I do.
And we appreciate that. In the book, you talk about 5 stages, and I'd like to touch on them because it's not just a book that you read. It's a very interactive opportunity to help figuring your stuff out. But again, you're local and you're accepting patients, and it's DrEdithShiro.com if you want to reach out to the doctor and to get more information. But it's a very important work because I think we all carry stuff.
Yes.
And to process that trauma is very detailed in the book. So perhaps we can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. That's the other intention for me to write this book, which is I'm describing and giving language to a process that we already go through when we're doing this healing. And in the same way that we have language for other things in our lives, for example, for grief. Like, you know, a lot of people know there are 5 stages of grief, or we go through like acceptance and denial and bargaining and all that. Or we have, you know, language to describe other things. We didn't have the language to really describe this process of healing to get to post-traumatic growth. And I think it's super important. People come to me and say, "Hi, Dr. Shiro, I'm between 3 and 4, stage 3 and 4. Oh, I'm already in radical acceptance. Or I'm already." So I love it when people start using this language because it's going to facilitate the communication of where we're at. And because I want everybody to go through this healing process, I mean, it's great. So we start with the first stage.
Recognition.
Yes. It's radical acceptance. This radical acceptance is recognizing what's happening with you. It's that pause that we talked about before to say, okay, let me stop. I'm not going to continue with my addictive behavior. Let me see, why am I keep repeating and, you know, choosing the same thing over and over? Why am I being paralyzed all over again? Again, why am I so depressed? Or I'm so like these things that we tend to do over and over and over. These are defense mechanisms or things that are stopping us from really truly feeling good with ourselves and with the world. And it's that moment of pause that requires a lot of courage, because it's like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, let's be radically honest.
Oy vavoy. It's that aha moment. And then you walk through awakening.
Right, which is like, okay, now I know I'm depressed, or now I know I'm anxious, or now I recognize that I have an addictive behavior. I cannot do this alone.
And becoming?
I have to do this with help with others.
Absolutely.
And then I create a new narrative about it. And with the help of others, those like belief systems are no longer working. So I'm creating new ones. I create a new story about myself. How do I want to see myself? What else am I doing? What other possibilities are out there in the world? And then we integrate all of that. That's stage 4. And so we can get to stage 5, which is wisdom and growth. And that's where all of these things that we've been talking about say, wow, I really am grateful. I really appreciate. I'm really, having meaningful interactions. I really know what my priorities are. I have a sense of purpose in my life. I wake up every morning and I know why I'm waking up every morning. And I'm much more spiritual. Like I'm more knowing that I'm part of a whole, that I'm one with the universe somehow, like whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
this
that
is not
Zen
a
moment. That Zen moment.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Your work began 25 years ago, probably a lot younger because you were a very inquisitive child, as you said. What have you thought then, as that younger clinician, to this woman that's matured and morphed and wrote this magnificent book? I must tell you, it's really been a real saving grace for some of the stuff that I am processing, and I think we all are dealing with our stuff. Yeah. So I find that that's the gift, and I appreciate that. But here we are at this moment. Here we are at the end of May, 115 degrees out in Miami. How has your life changed, or the way you see your work changed from when you started to now?
I love, you know what? That's the first. Nobody has asked me that question before. Thank you.
High five, girlfriend. Yeah, that's why you're my Shiro.
Because I want to tell you something. I think I always was very committed to my work, and I have always been very committed to healing and helping and being there in the best possible way that I can. And of course, the more I grow, the more I can help other people, of course. But one of the things that I think I was not having back in those days, 25 years ago, is the understanding of how important spirituality is for the work that we do, and how important being aligned, not just physically and emotionally, mentally, but also spiritually.
So how does one get, I mean, that sounds really like very ethereal and very out there, but what does that mean?
That means that I had it very disconnected in my life. I was like doing a lot of I would go into the mountains of Peru and do some shamanic medicine work, or I would go and do a lot of meditation, or I would try, different ways of understanding, from, Kabbalah and other things that would come from not from a clinical academic place, but from the alternative world, right? Like from the millennial wisdom that we have. So I would never put it together.
So how did you
I found out at some point, as I was doing the work more and more, and it became more and more and more challenging because I was getting harder and harder cases also. I was like, there's something here that is not, it's there, but it's not finishing. And then I said, let me try with one. And I said, it's almost like coming out of the closet and saying, okay, I'm spiritual. So let me bring spirituality into my office.
If that don't work, let's go the other way.
And then slowly I started to say, integrate it into my own practice. And that made a huge shift.
So if we are the teachers, let's say, and the students are there, if we're not together in our own centering, then we can't center our patients. Is that what you're saying?
Always. You can only help a person to the level where you're at. How's that? You cannot, you vibrate at the level that the other person is there to. You cannot take the person further that you haven't gone through. So that's why I try to always work on myself, please God, with a lot of, hopefully support from my mentors and from, my spirituality and from every support that I can get so I can help other people. Because if I don't work on myself and I don't get better with myself, how am I going to help others?
Who's your biggest mentor?
I have such a privilege to have amazing people around me, and I've had it. For some reason, I lived in New York most of my life, and I was surrounded with the people that wrote the books. Can you believe? I always say that story. I'm like, I was in the middle of Manhattan with the people that wrote the books. So, for example, Judith Herman, who was the person that wrote Trauma and Recovery, what's the Bible trauma. I was hanging out with her.
But did you know? It must have been your frequency. It must have been your frequency. You just brought it to.
It was. I don't know how it happened, but it was very special. People like Ken Hardy, Jack Soul, Karl Auerbach, Evan Imber Black. I mean, there are huge people in the field. Esther Perel, like I said, Judith Herman, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine. These are my teachers.
So these are your mentors and your guides.
Amazing people I had around. I'm very blessed. Yeah,
so what's next for you in the time we have left?
So really talking about intergenerational trauma and talking about collective trauma, I think more and more we have to go open those circles up. This is no longer about individual process. This is not just about us taking care of ourselves, but I think it's us taking care of ourselves in the collective and doing it in groups and doing it in communities and opening up for conversation. And I think the more we can have open spaces for difficult conversations and interconnectedness, the more we can heal. Because I don't want to be one of the people that is supporting polarization, isolation, and fragmentation, and loneliness. And this is what we're living right now. So here I am trying, and I think we all have to be in this place of like opening for spaces for inter-dialogues, people that we might not agree with each other, but we can tolerate each other.
And especially now, since it's so polarized, that we just have to listen and just be mindful and respect one another in a very coming from a heartfelt, loving place.
Yeah, I think that's really the goal. I think that humanity has to come to a place of being at peace with the differences and tolerating and respecting each other, even when we are not the same, even when we're not agreeing, even when we don't think alike, that we can acknowledge that. And actually, that's the richness of humanity. So to be open, to receive everybody, to accept everybody for who they are, without having to change it or rejecting or polarizing. The world is not black and white. The world is not just duality. The world is a nuanced, complex, range of emotions and feelings. So let's deal with that.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for the time that we've had together. It was very eye-opening and a great learning experience for me. And the book, The Unexpected Gift of Trauma, The Path to Posttraumatic Growth. It's available where?
It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, every Books and Books. It's on Audible with my voice in Spanish. It's translated into 10 languages. It's in Kindle. So really, you have no excuse not to find it. It's everywhere. It's right there. I want you to read it, to listen to it, to be with it, and give me feedback. Let me know what you think of it, because I think it's transformational. And I wanted to thank you also for the amazing questions that you've been asking and the wonderful conversation that we've been having.
My pleasure. And I learned so much. And again, you can reach Dr. Edith Shiro at drEdithShiro.com, and you actually have a place where you can fill out a questionnaire and get some feedback and response from your doctor. Yes,
get on my website, on Instagram.
She's reachable.
I'm reachable. There are many more things coming up. I'm doing a workbook for people to be using. I'm doing some training for people. I'm opening up for like some group therapy. So we'll see. We'll talk.
And we're going to have you. And we're going to talk to you again. I'm going to have you back. And thank you so much for this time, Doctor. And all the best and good in all your travels across the world, and up and coming and making peace and connecting people in a very positive and post-traumatic growth way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Fara Sax. Until next time.